Welcome everyone.
Here we go. Here they come.
I can't see my controls anymore. Welcome everyone for our last and not the least at all session on collaborating competencies, and this time we're talking about collaborating with society. Maybe we can just start, Stephanie, with the housekeeping tips for people who are trickling in, and just to get that going. Yeah. I'm sure they know it by heart by now.
Well, you know, third time's the charm. So good morning, everyone, if you're joining us from across Canada, and good afternoon for folks who are joining us from Europe. My name is Stephanie Draker, and I am the program manager with WorkInCulture. And for better or for worse, I'm also going to be your Zoom tech support during this session. So as we're getting settled in, just a note that you have been set to mute, and we just ask you that you remain on mute until we open things up for questions. Though you can type questions into the chat, and I'll be monitoring that as we progress. We'd also ask that you please consider keeping your camera on if possible. We know that we're not the only Zoom session that you've had this week, or possibly not the last one today, but we do appreciate that level of connection that seeing your faces provides. This session is being recorded and will be posted on our website after the fact if you'd like to revisit anything. And a live transcript is available for those who want to follow along through our Otter app. You can just click on the drop-down menu that's located at the top of the screen there. I'll also put a link into the chat in a moment. And you can also try following along with the closed caption via Zoom, though sometimes I find that there's a lag. And just because we're coming together from many regions and organizations today, if you'd like, as a way of getting to know one another and invite possible opportunities for connections when we get to our networking portion, we'd also suggest consider changing your display name to also show your organization name, your city, and pronouns, if you'd like. And we have a full agenda today, starting off with our presentations from our guest speakers, and then moving on to our panel dialogue, and then we're reserving the final 20 minutes or so of the session for networking for those who would like to stay on and continue to get to know our guest speakers and one another a little bit better. So that's it for the housekeeping. And now a little ad, if you will, if you'll indulge me, for WorkInCulture. As I mentioned, my name is Steph Draker, and I'm the program manager with WorkInCulture. I'm also the lead on the festival's Learning Exchange program, or FLeX, as we've nicknamed it. And for those who are not familiar with WorkInCulture, or are mainly familiar with our popular job board, we are so much more than the job board. We are a nonprofit arts service organization with a focus on supporting the career development of people working in the arts. And we span across all disciplines and roles that make up the cultural workforce. And we do programming such as this to upskill people who are working in the sector. Our focus is Ontario, which has given us ample opportunity to connect with people across many different traditional territories, though through virtual delivery, we've been able to reach people even further, especially over the last couple of years. However, our offices and core team are located in Toronto, or Toronto, which is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We just want to mention that we're grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land and connect on it with others in any form, be it virtually for now and hopefully in person again soon. And since we're coming together from different locations today, I would invite each person in the session to consider the territories that they live and work on in order to reflect on the Indigenous life and history that surrounds us, even when we're on Zoom. So that is a bit about us. And now next, a little bit about the program that this session stems from. So FLeX has been a pilot project and program funded by Canadian Heritage and supported by partners at the City of Toronto, City of Greater Sudbury, Ontario Cultural Days, the Kingston Arts Council, and Ottawa Festivals Network. And it was inspired directly by the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on arts and heritage festivals, and a need expressed by this community for training around more effective collaborative practices. So we have a cohort of 15 festivals who applied to participate in an intensive group learning experience over the past couple of months. And as part of this programming, We've also identified the spotlight sessions as a way to engage both the main cohort of participants, as well as a wider network of colleagues, peers, and stakeholders who also work alongside festivals. So at this point, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Fanny Martin, to talk a bit more about the program format and also lead things off with our guests.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Yeah, I'm Fanny Martin. I'm the creative director of Art of Festivals, which is a company that brings more life into the art sector and more art into everyday life. And I love festivals, as the name suggests. I think there's such a nexus, like a concentration of all good things to just spread out further out in society. They are collaborative by nature. And this is what we wanted to really work on with this program. It's how can we supercharge the collaborative competencies and skills and attitudes, behaviors of festivals in general. So we had 3 chapters in our program. The first was really looking at collaborating with yourself, so at team level and at peer level. The second one, collaborating with artists, we actually looked at things like policy and frameworks for talent development and commissioning schemes, because that's really all about figuring out the level of responsibility that festivals can take in developing a scene or a genre, an art form. How do you deal with questions of emerging artists versus experienced artists and the always neglected mid-career artists? So we talked about lots of things like this, and the recordings are available on the WorkInCulture website. We also aim at some point to do some transcripts that will come, I hope. The recordings are there, and you can just watch the dialogue section, which is what we're going to get into in a moment with our wonderful co-hosts for today. So today we talk about collaborating with society. And that may sound a little wide and unfocused because it's complex. And at large, we're going to talk about big things like social engagement, cultural democracy, social justice, climate justice, and again, this question of responsibility and how do we work with partners who have different ways of working, maybe different goals? How do we find shared values? How do we make things advance together through art? Because that's what we do. So our co-hosts for today are the wonderful, so in order of apparition in a moment, they will each do a small presentation about their practice and how they grapple with this theme. Chris Ross, who is joining us from London, UK. Chris has been with 64 million artists for the past few years, and he also has a lot of others skills to his toolkit, which he will cover shortly with you. So 64 million artists, wonderful organization in the UK. I came across them because I took virtual training with them. So I highly recommend to check that out. They do. Chris actually leads facilitation training for people working with community engaged arts. Highly recommended. And then Charlotte Rotureau, joining from France, from a small village somewhere in the east of France. Charlotte will talk about the ecological transition that she accompanies festivals throughout. So all the absolutely just stunning innovations that festivals have been experimenting with in France and elsewhere, of course, but lots of inspiring examples. So Charlotte accompanies this transition. And then today, our local translator, which is something we've been experimenting with this program, is Kevin Matthew Wong, artistic director of Broadleaf Theatre, who himself has a very deep practice of social justice, climate justice, and theatre, all weaving things together. And so Kevin is here to bring things home and to transplant, all the things we hear, the seeds that are, international peers will be mentioning. What does it mean for the Ontario context? What does it mean in relation with the priorities that we tend to put forward, funding systems, of course, all that kind of stuff. So Kevin will be in dialogue with the full panel, really to translate. That's our experiment. If you've been here before, we had Clayton Windat and Owais Lightwala in this seat. So we're super, super chuffed to have Kevin today. So let's get us started. We're going to open up with Chris. I can stop sharing for a moment so we see who's in the room actually. Hello, everybody. Wonderful people. We have people from the cohort and we have people from everywhere else, which is exciting. So Chris, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Fanny. And it's really lovely to be here. And yeah, to be part of this conversation. It's a real privilege. My name is Chris Rolls from 64 Million Artists. We are a social enterprise working across the UK. I'm sat here in Leytonstone in London, East London. So I thought what I'd do, I was invited just to sort of share a bit about our organisation, our practice and work, and give you a little bit of a kind of a sort of a what we do kind of behind the scenes. And then I know that we're going to be in a dialogue later as well with everyone. So really looking forward to that. But I thought I'd just share with you how 64 Million Artists work. And just as a way of a bit of an introduction, I've been with the organisation since 2017. Goodness, that seems odd saying that's gone so quickly. Before that, I was working for 25 years in collaborative arts, in working as a community performing artist, running big, large-scale community operas and theatre productions. And then also, I'm a qualified psychotherapist working with groups, mostly with the LGBTQ+ community, working with groups and individuals. So they're sort of different lenses, but I very much see it as a Venn diagram coming together in different ways of working with communities in different ways. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully you will all be able to see this. So how are we doing? Quick thumbs up if anyone can see my, yeah, there you go, Steph, thank you. So 64 Million Artists, who are we? We're a relatively small team right now. We're only six full-time members. But as the name of the organisation suggests, we very much see ourselves as network multipliers. So we're a small organisation, but we are plugged into and passionate about developing networks of creative communities across the whole UK. So we think in a very networked way rather than in an organisational model way. We were founded in 2014 by Joe Hunter and David Micklem. Our income model is that we get fees from client organisations who ask to work with us. We have a good, strong relationship with universities and higher education institutions that we do a lot of cultural leadership work with. Cultural organisations in the cultural sector, galleries, museums, libraries, theatre companies, all sorts of cultural organisations. And the third sector, we work with local authorities, libraries, councils, prisons, schools, care homes, all sorts of charities and voluntary sector. That's what we call the third sector in the UK. I don't know if that applies to other international contexts. And we also get money, quite a fair bit of money from the English Arts Funding Board, the Arts Council England. We get a lot of project grants. We also get a lot of grants from trusts and foundations that are interested in community engagement, creative community engagement, and co-creation, which is what we specialise in. So I think it's fair to say, and this is what I'm going to go on to talk about briefly, is that co-creation has become this big buzzword in the UK cultural sector at the moment. What is it? We're all trying to do it. That's something we can discuss. But that's something I'm passionate about, and and do a lot of training and development around co-creation. We have a research partner called TILT, who've just come on board because we are also passionate about evidence-based practice. How do we know that what we're doing has impact? How do we measure what we're doing when we're talking about very qualitative relational processes? What does measurement look like and mean in those contexts? And we have a mission, which is a little bit grandiose. So I thought I'd put it down as we want to catalyze the creativity of everyone in the UK, and we want to shift culture to being co-created and culturally democratic. So those are our core values. That's what we're passionate about to do. How do we do that? Well, we do a lot of partnering on bespoke public engagement projects, co-creating, as I've mentioned. In my role as head of training development, we do a lot of training and development. So we run a lot of training programs to help people think through public engagement models and co-creation. And we also run large-scale creative challenge programs. Our flagship one is called the January Challenge, which in the first month of every year, we really try and catalyze the creativity of everyone in the UK by offering them mini creative challenges every day for 31 days, and people do it individually and share on social media, but they're also doing it in contexts like schools, care homes, prisons, workplace environments, and with friendship groups on Facebook and all sorts of different contexts. So I thought I'd talk about 3 different projects that I'm currently working on. These are all live, these are all happening as we speak, in different kind of place-based ways in which we're working. So this is Coventry Community Connectors. Coventry in the Midlands is currently the UK City of Culture 2022. And as you can imagine, running a City of Culture during a global pandemic has been a huge challenge. But I've had the pleasure of co-creating with the City of Culture producers a project which helps local community activated community members develop a project with their own community. And that word community, we're allowing them to define in whatever meaningful way they want to choose to define it. So we're looking at communities of lived experience around issues like mental health, faith-based communities, communities of the same race or ethnicity, or even just hyperlocal location, like their particular set of streets, or in an area of social deprivation, a particular housing project. What are we doing with them? Well, we're giving them skills and training and creating a peer learning structure. So they get monthly training sessions, they get a grant to run a project, they get signposted onto continuing professional development opportunities, all sorts of networking and signposting. But it's very much developing the seeds of a local peer support network so that people can share their own experiences, resources, and skills with each other. And we're in the middle of the project right now, but it's just been some wonderful projects. We've got community gardens that have been developed. We've got steel drum projects that have been developed with new arrivals, Afghan women in northern parts of Coventry. We've got a mental health support creativity project, workshop project that's been developed specifically for BAME youth, for Black and minority ethnic youth in the city. All sorts of great stuff. And what we're trying to do with this project is build capacity in the community by giving people confidence, skills and resources they can carry on and share those throughout their networks, so that we're sort of seeding into the community in a way with that project. So that's something we're doing at the moment with Coventry Community Connectors. We're also working with the Royal Docks London, which is a massive cultural regeneration project that's happening down in the Royal Docks area around City Airport, along the eastern part of the Thames estuary in London, and we're helping them develop what's called a Creative Connectors Network, which is also about helping local creatives have better professional training development opportunities. How do they connect more with their communities? And we're trying to develop the terms of reference for something called the Doc Local Panel, which is about creating a network of local creatives who have a budget which comes from the Mayor's office in London. Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, has a cultural budget to help them co-program part of the Royal Docks cultural programme with a remit to connect to harder to reach communities throughout the Royal Docks. Newham, the London borough that the Royal Docks falls in, has some of the highest indices of social deprivation in London. So it's really a project that's sort of helping really to sort of locate and connect with those communities. My third example, which is live and going on at the moment, is called Bexley Collective. This is a project called Creative People and Places project that the Arts Council runs. This is Thamesmead in the South London Borough. And what we're doing here is we've got 4 different local charity and voluntary sector organisations. So we've got a charity hospice, we've got an employment service, we've got a Black and minority ethnic hip hop dance company, and we've got a mental health charity, and they're all collaborating, co-creating together to create a cultural project together. So they get monthly training, they get some resource, some money, but also really it's about peer support. They're offering each other resources, skills, and a sort of a networked way of sharing their equity with each other to create a co-creation project. I point to this particular project, Bexley Collective, as what I think is actually the most really co-creative project I've ever worked on. It's very exciting. It is being evaluated by a company called the Art of Regeneration as well in the UK. So very, very excited about that as a model, and we're trying to develop that all the time as well. 2018, we were asked by the Arts Council England to sort of interrogate what some of the best methods of community engagement in the cultural sector were. And it resulted, we went away and we did a piece of work, Ed Eichen, who we commissioned as a writer, but we went out and we looked at kind of models of best practice. And we really looked at those cultural organisations that were creating work by and with community members and not for. So not sort of just that collaborating or consulting, but really looking at models of shared equity. How has the project or the organisation or the programme really been co-developed with the local community? The result was this report. It's on our website. I can link you to it later in the chat. Cultural Democracy in Practice. And what we aimed to do is not only look at case studies, which is actually what we did, but come up with some sort of principles of best practice. And that resulted really in looking at kind of, what are these principles of cultural democracy? It's a contentious term, right? I mean, culture and democracy, it's a car crash of 2 abstract nouns. What do we mean by those 2 things? But we were sort of using it as a flag in the sand. How do we really look at equality, diversity, and inclusion in our practice, and come up with these sort of principles? I won't read all these out, but they're in the document, they're on our website. Facilitating rather than leading, working with your stakeholders, employing professional artists to work with communities to co-create ideas, so young people playing an active role, leader as facilitator, really looking at much of what's going on is everyday creativity rather than funded artistic activity. How do we redefine and reframe what culture and creativity is? Communities engaging at the heart of arts and cultural organisation, and at the bottom there, people as participants. So we're really interested in what this concept of meaningful participation in culture is. So that was a very quick, trying to get a lot in my 10 minutes. That was a very quick overview, but maybe we can come back to stuff. But yeah, just a quick intro to 64 Million Artists.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. The point of these little short presentations is to give you facts and to kind of show you this is what these examples have achieved. And then we're going to go into the how, which is very exciting. So don't hesitate to put questions, comments into the chat, because then it helps us to also remember like the salient points. And like it's a way of conversing using the chat. We're going to move on to Charlotte, who's going to talk about ecological transitions for festivals in France. But this is where we hope that there can be a lot of sharing of practice and a lot of mutual influencing. So Charlotte, over to you.
Thank you very much, Fanny and Stephanie, for the invitation. Hello, everybody. So I'm Charlotte. I'm from France. So I'm so sorry for my terrible accent, which may be a bit funny at some point, but well, no worries. I've been living in UK, and actually everybody told me that don't lose your accent. It's actually quite nice. So I haven't lost it then. So I'm gonna try to have the same exercise as Chris. Trying to do my best to make it. So I'm gonna share my screen. I do it the opposite way. Here we go. Just to give you a little bit of who I am. So I'm based in France, but I've been working on international sailing events all around the world, except in Canada. So I went to US or Australia or Singapore and all over the place. And I was working at this event for about 5 years as organizer. And then I decided to stop and have a break because I did burn out after 6 years working too hard and too much. So I did a cycling trip in Europe, and it has been the beginning for me of changing life and having ecological transition in mind. Because before I did my cycling trip, I was about taking plane about 50 times per year, and I was traveling a lot, and I never put together all my carbon footprint. But I don't really want to see that, to be fairly honest. Well, so I had this cycling trip which changed a bit my life, and then I wanted to kind of create my job around three subjects, which was really important for me. About territory, like I come from countryside, and for me it's really something that it's a part of me, and I wanted to see how the countryside could be as a city, a place nice to live, and not just where we have the farm and where our food is. And then event was still something which was really in front of me, like inside of me. So I wanted to carry on this aspect. And then all the aspect about ecological transition. It's what we call, like in English, you may say sustainability. In French, we call it ecological transition, which is the third aspect I really wanted to introduce in my way of working. And then I did a master thesis about it. The question was, what is an event in the society which go into an ecological and social transition, like something deep, not what we are doing now, which is greenwashing, but something really deep, where we change things. When I saw your slide, Chris, about cultural democracy, I was like, this is it. It's where I want to go, but we are not there now. So I did this master thesis, and then I launched my own company, my own activity, which is EVVI. In French, it's like a life event, beginning of each word. And since 2 years, I'm helping festival, cultural policy, cities, territory, to develop the transition, the ecological transition view and the policy. 1,300 kilometers in France. Oh, sorry, maybe cut a little bit. Yeah, okay. So I did a cycling trip in France, and the aim was to meet people who are doing not only just having just simple, not simple, but just a normal action on an event, which can be like having a waste disposal and things like that, but going either further in the sustainability strategy and way of seeing the event. So I did this trip, and then I did almost 60 interviews with these people. And then I published a newsletter, and I had a YouTube channel to just share with French people, so it's in French, but some other view about how you can organize an event differently. And so in French, like I never realized, but Fanny told me, like, yeah, France, it's actually like a festival territory, and I didn't realize it. And actually, when I put numbers together, I realized, oh yeah, there is something big happening in France about festivals. So there is about 100 festivals attending more than 15,000 people in France. So in 2019, almost 4 million people attended the 15 biggest festival. So as you can see on the map, they are mainly in the west of France, which is Brittany, which is an area where it's the place where there is a most festival in France. And then the biggest festival, which is Festival Interceltique de Lorient, which is South Brittany, it's attending about 800,000 people during 10 days. So it's a huge festival. And then 13 festivals are welcoming more than 150,000 people, which is huge. And then the main format of this festival are on 3 days. It's mainly what is how it's organized. And almost half of the festival have a special topic, which is a type of music or a specialty. Some of them are only on sustainability, some of them are only on rock or on other kind of music. So just to give you an idea about the event carbon footprint, so it's a study which come from, like, it's a study from 2010, which is a bit far away, but just to give you an idea about what is an event carbon footprint. And the most of it, it's around mobility from people and mobility also from artists, so both of them. The second one is food and beverage, so all the food and beverage for public, but also for artists, for volunteers, for everyone around the event. The third one is logistic and energy, which is electricity and water and all the material you are consuming during the event. The fourth one is communication, which is how you communicate, so flyers, banners, everything like that. And then the fourth one is waste. And then others was about, it was on 15 festivals, so they had different topics, some aspects they couldn't compare in between events. So the carbon is in France, is used a lot to compare festivals and to see what has to be improved. But as you can see here, waste, which is only 1%, it's actually a big topic, because if you don't do anything on waste on your festivals, then you can see rubbish everywhere, and it's not something really nice for people. So even if waste hasn't a big aspect on the event's carbon footprint, it has a big impact on the image or on the visibility of the event. So this study is a bit old now, because I think communication so far should be about 5 or 6%, because like we more than 2%, I assume from now. So in France, there is a lot of projects to help the sector to develop sustainability practice. So there is a ISO norm which has been developed in UK, but it's developing a lot in France. And there is labels and also a lot of charts which are set up by different networks. And there is a lot of resources available online and a lot of guides to help you to make things happening. And now the Minister of Culture is starting now to go into this aspect, but even if it's for the moment it's small, but it's a topic now, which was not the case before. But it's not enough. What's happening now, it's like there is all of these tools and people are trying to put some small aspects, but the question now has to be further and deeper into the cultural models that we have got in France. Actually, maybe also in Canada, but one of the reflection is like we can't have so many big festivals as we have got now, because they have so many impacts. Like because public takes their car to go to a place where it's not really set up to welcome like 100,000 people for 4 days, then it's developing a big carbon footprint, which is not really helping for climate change. So I just wanted to just put a definition behind transition, because sometimes it's a bit confusing for people, but transition is a change from one form or type to another. So it's really going from something we have now to something different. So, and transition is the way, is the red light between what we know now and what will be tomorrow, or in 10 or 20 years. And for me, what is really important is to start now to say, okay, what are we going to be in 10 years? And how do we go there? And trying year after year to create a new model, financial model, and also maybe changing the way we do, maybe changing deeply what we do. And cultural has to maybe not being only like a theater, but maybe a theater can be something much more than just welcoming artists and play. It can be a place where life can have another form. And there isn't one transition, and there is no recipe. I mean, by this way, like there is no just one way to do that. There is multiple ways to do it. I just wanted to show this image because I loved it. It's like we are focusing a lot on carbon emission. Like footprint is about, I mean, in French, it's like we speak in every meetings or things like carbon footprint. It's what we have to do now. We need to measure that. But we forgot that there is so much other thing around which are so important. And carbon footprint is interesting, but it shouldn't be everything. So I like this image of like we are focusing on something, but we forget everything else. And I like to see like I like to explain that for me, what we are living in the ecological transition right now is not only about environment or biodiversity. There is much more behind. And Otto Scharmer, who is a teacher in US, wrote a book which is called Theory EU, and it's showing that for him, actually, we are living 3 divides. One is ecologic divide, one is social divide, and one is spiritual divide. So it's kind of ecological divide is divide between me and the nature, social divide is between me and other people, and social divide about spirit is between me and myself. And these 3 aspects are in the ecological transition. It does mean like it's great to work on biodiversity, but if we don't work on democracy, if we don't help people to have a better quality of life, it won't work. It's something bigger than just ecological. And I like this picture because it shows that it's much more than that. So just wanted to finish on carbon tunnel vision. It's like around that, for me, there is other topic, which can be social interaction in between people, and what Chris is doing in UK, it's really like in this vision. Social justice, as we can get, and not having so many different worlds, like kind of walking next to each other and not having any social justice. Oops, sorry. Yeah. Confidence in our politics system. For me, it's one of the key elements. As in French, we don't have any more confidence, and actually it's a French election, so we can see it strongly. There is a work condition as well, like how people, what are are people in good condition to have a decent work and to feel good at work. Oops, the other aspect. Time as a precious resource, because as we can see, like time is so, like people are so rushing everywhere, and we forgot that it's so precious that we have really to take care about it and to take care about the time of people that we are working with. Distributional wealth and sorry, I can't see it. Transparency, yes, and it was the last one, sorry. Oops. So for me, transition is another way of seeing and thinking our life and our society. So the question behind transition is for me, so which kind of life do we want? And which kind of thing do we want to do in our life and in culture and through our festivals and what we do with people? I just want to finish with one, because I think I have I'm totally out of time, but just to say that when we speak about transition and when we speak about this subject in discussion with other people, many times we see it as just like, oh, if people don't do it, it's just because they don't want to do it, or they do a choice, they are not responsible, they don't realize what's happening around, and it just, we see it as at the top of the iceberg. But actually, when people decide, when people decide if they want to go into transition, or if they want to change their way of going to work by cycling instead of taking their car, or by buying local food instead of buying things coming from Asia, then actually they do their choice because inside of them, they have some beliefs, they have some fear, they have some hope, they have some habits, some culture aspect, which make their choice. And actually, ecological transition is not at all a rational aspect. It's something totally irrational, because it comes from what we have inside. And what everyone has inside is different for everybody. So yeah, I'm going to stop now, because otherwise I'm going to totally take the time of everyone.
Oh no, that's fascinating. Thank you for that. Yeah, wow. I think between Charlotte, all your concept that you are like unfolding, like really touching upon, what stops us from making these choices, or like I love how you are also highlighting the fact that waste is the most visible, but yet the least effective way of thinking about climate change, etc. There's so much to unpack, and we're going to have Kevin to weave these two really like super content heavy fast presentations, because Kevin, you do this through art, climate justice, social justice, and you are here in Ontario, you relate to the local context. So what are your thoughts, as they are emerging? How are you inspired by these two different yet complementary presentations?
Thanks, Fanny. I'm totally inspired. So I'm really buzzing with the ideas that we've just heard from both Charlotte and Chris, and I'll try to be as coherent as possible through this excitement. So just to start, my name is Kevin Matthew Wong. I'm a Hakka Chinese Canadian theater creator. Generally, I focus on creating work about climate justice, and through that, I offer dramaturgy to climate-focused artists and projects. And I also try to create spaces for collaboration amongst the artistic community. So one example would be an organization that's on a bit of a hiatus right now that I helped to co-found called Artists for Climate and Migrant Justice and Indigenous Sovereignty, which tried to activate the artistic community to support on the ground political organizations. And another example would be an organization called Replay, which was getting artists to respond to art through art. And the intention of that was to keep the artistic conversation alive beyond just the critic and the artist. I'm also lucky to be a producer with Why Not Theater and a facilitator with some of the organizations that are here today. And in that role as a facilitator, I often work with young people and newcomers, and I often see my role as a bridge between the institution and the community members, and also as a translator, both directions between the community members and the institution. So I guess I'll just start with some of the things that I'm hearing and receiving. And I just want to acknowledge how deeply empathetic and visionary both of these speakers have been. Fanny started today by mentioning how the intention of FLeX is to supercharge our festivals. I think that's such an exciting vision. But this session in particular, I think is really about how to super change our festivals. And both of our speakers have been talking about theories of change, really. And they've spoken about changing ourselves as individuals. Charlotte shared the story of how this bike journey really changed her conception of the climate conception in France. And both of our speakers also are involved in national conversations about how to make change. And I think that's very relevant to the network that we're creating here through FLeX. So maybe I'll just chat really quickly about the fact that this work, first of all, it is aspirational. It is visionary, it's electric, and it's really alive. And it's not always, and probably not yet, how we are envisioning community arts and programming in Canada. Often as the facilitator of community arts and programming, I feel that we're the, awkward, younger sibling of the exciting bit of programming. And there's a very particular pocket of funding for the activity that happens over here. And there's a particular, pocket of staff that are over here, often contract. And so that knowledge, that investment in the work that happens over here isn't really at the core and the center of what our institutions do. Just to acknowledge there are systems in place that make it that way. But the kinds of changes that we're talking about and the kinds of programming that Chris and Charlotte are talking about do really need us to get philosophical about what's at the core of our institutions and who's at the center of those conversations. And if those people cannot be actively at the center of those conversations, how we actually get a route from them to get there. I think that sometimes as artistic institutions, we think of ourselves as leading the way in political conversations, but really this conversation about collaborating with society, I'm hearing that we need to clear the way for community members to actually be making change in our institutions. And then hopefully our institutions can make space for change to happen in society through the individual community members. I'm just gonna keep trying to connect some threads here. Charlotte mentioned not greenwashing, but like this need for a climate consciousness. I think one thing that maybe we can chat about is like a vision of change. There was that diagram of the square that transitions into the triangle, and that triangle is like an aspirational shape. Similarly, I think we're just in the beginning buds of this climate conversation in our artistic institutions. It doesn't feel quite organic yet. It really feels like we're trying to fit in these particular metrics into how we should do things, but they haven't yet infused into the why we do things. And that I think is really something that we should talk about. And the climate is like one example of, I'm sure, many types of different transitions that our institutions are going through, whether it's involving new voices from marginalized communities, whether that's accessibility, whether that's support for caregivers, both in our audiences and amongst our collaborators as artists. And maybe I'll just maybe pause there. I have some other thoughts, but I'll just say that what I'm hearing is that collaboration really has the power to change our institutions themselves in a very deep way if we allow collaboration to do that. There's a very different conception of society when we think of society as a set of patrons or as a kind of as a wallet, versus then if we think about society as our participants, as our collaborators. So yeah, maybe I'll pause there and we can transition into our conversation.
There's so much to say. So yes, let's go into all our guest speakers. I mean, I like to call them co-hosts because, it's just we talked about that with Kevin, the difference between hosting and guesting and between being a good guest, all that kind of stuff. So just a sec, and Charlotte will come onto our panel. One point I picked out of also Charlotte's presentation is the carbon footprint as a measure of everything. Made me think of the calorie count as a measure of your kind of dietary habits, or the actual cost of food, or etc. It's so reductive, and it's just easy. It's it's impoverishing our discourse and our practices. So I'd like to start ourselves off with a question about first steps. How do we start? And we talked a little bit about it already, but Charlotte, Kevin, Christine, you presented kind of big visions, kind of the end of perhaps, and it's great to have a vision, but how do we make that first step? How do we know that's the step? Is there such a thing as the first step? Is there such a thing as too small? How do you feel about that? Who wants to take the baton? How do we start?
I can start. Sorry, I just for me, after cycling and meeting people and in my work as well, like discussing with others, what is for me the first step could seem simple, but actually really hard, is to open a space in the organization of your festival to actually discuss about it. So what is the vision of people in your organization about transition, like ecological transition, or like even social transition? What is the view of the people in your structure? Because you can decide to do like a plan, a sustainable plan in the direction, like the boss can decide, okay, we go to a sustainable plan, but the reality is like if people in the structure don't really understand what it does mean, or they feel that what they could give to the festival is not heard, then they feel so frustrated. So for me, the first step is actually to open discussion about it, really, and to be fairly honest and authentic with people. There is no one way, it's not that easy for anyone. Like even really advanced structure in France, they are facing the same problem. They did like a norm and ISO about 13 years ago, and now they decide to stop it because it's too squared. And then they want to have something more open, where they feel that they really can develop actions that they feel really good for them, which are not in the tick box list. So for me, the first step is really to create space to speak about it.
And I would say space and time, because this is what we come against, is this, we're so busy, there's other things to do, we need to write our reports, etc. But time to talk about nothing in some ways. I mean, kind of like we're doing now, like just opening up the book, you know, and finding our way through it. What about you, Chris? How do you start? How do you start with communities? What's this first step?
Yeah, I think it's a very I think it's the opposite of most models that most organizations have, which is about what are we going to do, and let's do it as quickly as we can and deliver. So I completely agree, Charlotte. For me, it is about opening up space and sort of being quite protective of that space in terms of what is that container, what is the quality of that space in terms of participation, safety, contribution, trust. I think a place to start, the most practical place to start, is actually feeling into the values of what it is that you want to do. And that does take time and space, because it requires a sort of, you know, it's a very exploratory sort of felt sense space. But what are the values ultimately that are underpinning your festival, your project, your program, your organization, or even what you as an individual want to do? And I think that there's a really big thing around obviously co-creation. We're always talking about collaboration, right? It's about bringing people together or organizations together. But I think you start with valuing the individual participants' values as well. So actually, what brings you to this project or organization? And what is it about yourself as an individual that is showing up in this space? Why do you want to be here? What are you vested? What are you really invested in doing here? And actually, just by surfacing values, you can sort of really start to see whether you get those conflicts and things that might further down the line of the project or the organization might eventually end up in some kind of rupture or mismatch. If you just start to think, well, why do I want to do this? Why do we want to do this? Is this art? What's the public value of art? What is the social justice value of this project or the ecological footprint of this? What do we value through doing it? And I think you start there rather than the what. You start with the why rather than the what. And that leads you in a different process. Just very quickly, Charlotte, I've got Otto Sharma next to me here. Absolutely. So values, the two quick things, systems thinking. So this is exactly where I agree with Charlotte. Rather than thinking in processes, we've got to think holistically of systems. What is the network doing? What's the network telling us? So away from these very simplistic linear models of delivery. And then power, I think. So I think value systems and power. Where really is the power? Right? So very often liberal arts organizations rush into these spaces and they say, let's work with hard to reach communities. Let's engage people that don't have the agency, without really surfacing what the implicit power structures are that are going on within those networks. And for me personally, that also involves looking at intersectionality. We're very good at looking at diversity and difference and marginalization. We're not good in institutions at looking at privilege, because it makes us all feel anxious, defensive and fragile, frankly. And I say this as a white man, and I say this as a gay white man. We're not good at looking at privilege and ourselves and thinking about how am I in this space and what power do I have, and what is really, what are the real factors that are going on.
Yes, so no easy answer to a not easy question. How do we start in complexity? What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, I resonate with a lot of that. I think that definitely when I was reflecting back and thinking about the potential of change, and that, again, that square to the triangle is a pretty radical change. And I think there may be fear behind engaging with what might be seen as more radical processes for collaboration, because to transition from a theater presenting organization to we're going to do a visual arts, community project because the community needs the visual arts project rather than theater project is challenging to that central conception of what an institution is or does. But that provocation from Chris to start with values is actually where the institution can be anchored. If the value is we want collaboration as a way that we work and we want to know our community well, then maybe that dictates that it must be a visual arts thing that happens every year, and it still deeply relates to us being in service of this community. Whereas a lot of the time when we are have committed to the OAC already that we're going to paint a mural, or other community projects, and then we find out that our community could be served by something else, we're not able to do that. So the thing that I would add to that actually is we've chatted about the internal conversation in institutions. Once we're ready to look externally, really listening is critical, and not listening to understand is one level, but actually listening with the understanding that it may change you. That, I think that's really important. It's not just to get a lay of the land and to say we fit here, this is who we are. This is the lay of land. This is the network, as Chris said. And the network actually is something alive, and we need to be alive with it, and it's going to change us, and Charlotte mentioned that word of opening, and how are we open to that? In which ways are we open to that? So it really is quite deep work. And I'm very much going to cheerlead anybody who is really inspired by this conversation to be doing that work, because it's definitely not easy.
Yes, and that's the themes that we touched upon, just to wrap up on our surveys that we try to organize in chapters, collaborating with peers, collaborating versus competition as well, as a practice, recognizing where we have competitive instincts and why, and changing our mindset from scarcity to abundance. There is enough for everyone because there must be enough for everyone. There is enough for everyone because we want it to be so. And yeah, we talked about institutional and systems and resistance, and we're just at the beginning.
And what is for me really important for everyone to understand that when you start this kind of reflection, you may, as you say, Kevin, it may change totally yourself, and it may change as well the work that you do in your festival. Maybe in 10 years, you won't do any more a festival on 4 days welcoming people, but you will have multiple other activities, which is around culture, but in another way. And maybe you will still have a festival, but smaller or different. But it doesn't. It's not. What I try to say in French, like as a forest grow, you know, when it's arrived at a certain age, the forest doesn't frozen, like stay like that forever. Like it does change, it does move, and we are in the same process. And what we know now, like festival or cultural system right now, was not the same 80 years ago and won't be the same in 20 years. And it's normal, it's just evolution. So for me, it's really important to keep that in mind, that the work that we know now, maybe in 10 years doesn't exist anymore. It will be something else. And it's okay, because if we go with the flow, then we also want, like, our work will also change. Like 10 years ago, I was just organizing an event, and now I changed my mind, and I love reading psychological books and other things. And it's not my original topic, let's say like that, but I'm moving with it, and it's fine. And I just develop all the skills. I learn again. I go to school, and it's part of it. And I think we should see evolution as a right thing, as a good thing. And Jeff, I see. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Charlotte. I'm just going to pick up on that, because I do agree with you. But there is this sort of way of working is a real challenge, and it does raise quite a lot of anxiety for institutions and organisations. Not because they've got a false consciousness, but because of the ways in which we as organisations and groups work. And I think it is partly about, you know, we need to upgrade our consciousness. But the point is, organisations have an architecture which is about delivering results in some way. We're putting on a festival, we've got a programme. You know, we create choice architecture, decision-making architecture, because we need to produce some kind of result. The issue is about how do we keep that choice-making architecture in constant dialogue with the effects it's having on its communities and its local environment, right? It's a challenge. There's always going to be that kind of, this is what I come up against, you know, because as soon as you start to think and talk to big institutions like a national theatre company, or, you know, an organisation that's got hundreds of employees, these are deeply, deeply frozen structures of decision making. And so it's a real, you know, it's really a challenge to get these kind of much more sensitive, relational, co-created ways of working and processes embedded within these big organizations. So I do agree with you, but I think sometimes a festival that's ephemeral and is always constantly reiterating itself has got the luxury of kind of like reflecting, you know, going on the learning reflective cycle. Sometimes it's very difficult for big organizations to make these shifts. They're like super tankers that are going, you know, in a specific...
I totally agree with you, Chris. And for me, what is super important is to think like, okay, in 10 years, we're going to have to change, or our model may not be still sustainable. Oh, from now up to 10 years, we change the model. But year after year, we try something new, but it can be small, but we try something and we learn and we see, okay, this can be developed, or we have to stop that, or we can change this like that. And we change step by step. And I totally agree with you. Like, the system around us is so frozen that it's taking a lot of energy for structure to move on forward. And
let's take this hint to go into our second question in our loose dialogue panel, and we'll come to Jeff's question as well towards the end, because evaluation is always on my mind personally. But I want to ask you about how you get to yes. How do you work towards convincing people to come into this dialogue through which both parties are changed? How do you influence? How do you convince, persuade? What works for you? What you know? How do you equip yourself as well for a journey that is, you know, working against resistance and towards cohesion? How does that work for you? Kevin, perhaps, how do you go to yes?
Sure. Well, I actually, my question to the question is like, what is the yes? You know, like, I think that has to be well defined. My job in the yes, I'll speak from the facilitator side of things, and that bridge kind of role is actually often translation between what the institutional structure is and how the community members engage with that institutional structure. And also finding a yes between who represents power in that institutional structure, who oftentimes maybe just shows up once or twice when me and the other facilitators are spending weeks and weeks with community members, and helping that person save face and be relevant to this group of community members. And what this yes is for these community members is like, we want to express ourselves in the most authentic way possible. I'm imagining that's not said explicitly usually, but that's what we try to do. And from the other end, it's we want something that maybe meets the expectations of our stakeholders, that are funders, that are donors, that are whatever. And there's probably some optics around what's here. So I guess there's two yeses that I'm thinking of. There's like this type of institutional stuff that is really critical, because when that person in power comes to this room, if the values behind that intention are not authentic, the community members feel that right away usually. And it is a breach of trust, and it's felt. And so our role as facilitators is really to, it depends on how much the facilitator cares about the institution, to be honest. And you're very lucky if your facilitator cares enough about your institution to protect the base of the institution to the community members, knowing how shallow some of these programs are. This is me being very, very blunt, but it's true. But it's true because at best right now, with the structures in place in many arts organizations in Canada, it's the goodwill of the facilitator and the belief of the facilitator in the best possible triangle version of the transition, that in Charlotte's image, that they're selling to the community to say engage with us. So I guess the short answer is hire good people. And like, but the values thing that Chris mentioned is critical on the first end, which is the institution end. And it makes it much less awkward for that great facilitator if the institution actually believes in the principles behind what it wants the community to do. And even me saying what it wants the community to do is evidence of how we think about these programs right now in Canada.
Yeah. So I've got to come in. I mean, Kevin, you can't agree with you more. I mean, I think the people in power in the cultural industry don't want to give away power. So what they'll do is that they say they want to, and they will pay lip service to things like co-creation and working with communities. But their vested interest, if they're on really good salaries running a cultural organization, is to change nothing. Because why would they want to, right? So you've got to kind of prove the social return. You've got to do the social return on investment talk. But I think whoever's put it in the chat about the agile thing, I think is absolutely right. We've got to do this work regardless. We've got to find a way to fund and do this work flowing around the big structures, right? And we will gradually sort of like wear them down and include them and get them on board. But waiting for permission is not, we've done, you know, we know this doesn't work. We don't wait for permission. We get on like good entrepreneurs and we do it. We find the funding to do it. We find the resources. It's very hard. It's not, you know, it's not easy. But I think waiting for permission from power is like the world is burning. Like, you know, it's too late. It's too late. We've got to do it. And I think that's where we have to become activists, artist activists, rather than just cultural practitioners. The world is calling us to step into a higher creative activist way of being. I really do believe, and I think it's the time, it's too late. We've got to do it now.
Yeah, I can just add a small aspect is when I'm working with people who are not really confident about going to ecological transition, or may not feel good about it, or may not even be conscious about what's happening around us. For me, the most important thing is to create an area, a space where when we dialogue, they feel safe about they feel safe about our discussion about the area where we are speaking. And my job is to create a space that people can get confidence in themselves and in the group, that they can do something, they can do it, they actually have the capacity and the power to do it, and also to give them l'envie, how do you call that?
Desire.
Yeah, the desire to go to another model and to change things. And my job is really to create an area, a project where people feel these two aspects, and they feel that, yes, okay, we can change something. I'm okay to change it. And this is for me key. As long as we are not creating this space, people don't feel safe about the discussion we've got or the project we build in organization, because they don't feel people are listening to them. They are just using the idea, or just saying, okay, yeah, we let them speak, but we already have a plan. And this is a problem, that people can't trust others. And for me, there is a big gap here. And this is what's happening in the same in French with territories or ministry or government. There is a gap between trust, and this is where we really have to recreate that, which is terrible to say, but our job now is to rebuild this trust.
Mm-hmm. An erosion of trust. And I want to address Jeff's question, because it's something that we did want to talk about. Definitely, how do we measure? Let's not say impacts. I didn't say impacts. I'm trying to change my vocabulary to not, use all these very aggressive words like tactic, strategy. All of this comes from military language. So I'm trying to think a lot about that. But how do we know what makes a difference and what difference it makes? So we know that, Charlotte, you use a lot of metrics, but you're also critical of the metrics being used.
Yeah.
And Chris, you work a lot around evaluation frameworks and creative evaluation frameworks. And Kevin, I'll be curious to know about also, how do you know what difference your art makes?
Yes. Let's go, Chris. I think you have much more to say.
I was just going to say, going back to values, I think thinking about networks and knowledge flows, right? So rather than, often what we're doing in the cultural industry is we're measuring things to sort of prove social return on investment, to prove that to the funder that something's been a success. So it's kind of all sort of, there's a lot of kind of bad faith data that's brought up in evaluation for those reasons. But really, I think you've got to think more about evaluation in terms of like information flowing through a network. So what is it that the community is learning about itself and its place in the world through the process that it's taking part in? And how is that improving itself along criteria around things like confidence, decision-making ability, autonomy, engagement with the environment, like really looking at how it's kind of like feeding back into the system so that it's useful information for the group itself, for the system itself. It's not just information flowing up hierarchies to power and funders and the government who wants. It's really thinking about keeping information flowing through the network so that the community can learn for itself. It's about capacity growing and building. So just to speak to that, I think one of the things that we're working with TEAL, who's our research agency, we're looking at a model of like, we've been racking our brains, how do you measure co-creation? It's just such an impossible thing to sort of think about, but it's actually sort of thinking about a network. You've got nodes and you've got ties and links. It's thinking about the strength of those links in the network. So how do you think about, what is it about the strong link? What is it about the knowledge flow between one community member or one community and another? What resources are they actually sharing? and you sort of start to think about the quality of the links in terms of it being strong or weak or non-existent, and think about those, because society, the fabric of society, a bit like soil in the ground that's really rich with lots of nutrients and lots of rhizomes and connecting fungi, to go to our sort of ecological metaphor. It's because it's connected. It's because the infrastructure is talking to each other in different parts, and it's like that. That's like the information in the system. How is it flowing? And we know that power withholds information from communities. That's how it works. So it's about really trying to keep that flow of information and awareness going, I think that's how I think of evaluation.
Yeah, I do agree with this way. And Jeff, it's a great question, because actually in France, it's the same. All of our system of financial attribution by the government is about how many spectators have you got in your festival, or what is the tourism impact you've got on your territory, how many rooms have been booked during the weekend, which because your event is there. And this is a key problem. Then it's just keeping competition between territory. This is what's happening in French, and me, it's a big shift to think like, if maybe it's more interesting to actually measure what I call like unmaterial heritage, which is something you can't see. And Chris, I like the way like you see like how deep are the link between structure, which is something super hard to measure. But for me, it's like it's really to evaluate your festival by how many links it's creating, how many new projects in between partners are building together, how many volunteers are shifting life because they are living an amazing experience and they want to do something else in their job, or like it's really thinking like outside of the box in the way that what is the impact of our event. Really, like, I don't know how many schools have been coming and learning about a new job or a new aspect of cultural, a new cultural aspect, like things like that. So taking numbers, because government want numbers, but looking at not only rooms booked during the weekend, but like all the things which make more sense for the local community. And for all the ecological aspects, I do think it's still interesting to have some measure. For example, how many bins have you got at the end of the festival, and how many can be recycled or not? And I think this kind of information are really key when you start a sustainable strategy, because then it's help you to focus on, okay, well, waste, we are good, but on food, on our transportation, we are so bad. So we're gonna focus on this item. So it's quite interesting at the beginning to have a couple of measures that you can follow year after year, but it's not the only aspect you have to look after. But it's quite interesting.
That's more about monitoring in some ways, like counting, assessing where you start, and then, because that's not what we're trying to do necessarily, just to reduce the number of waste. It's everything around it, like
that's right.
everything we're talking. Yeah,
that's why I love the iceberg model is perfect in this instance, Charlotte, because it's like you can measure events or things that you can. It's very easy to measure what we see, right? But then, as you absolutely said earlier, beneath that is behaviors, and beneath that is mindsets and beliefs. And then the further you go down the iceberg, the much more difficult it's, and we're very good. I think the problem of monitoring and evaluation is quite often what you do is you capture data and it very quickly gets turned into numbers. And then those numbers become the reason or the architecture for designing the next thing. And of course, that's not that's a really, really bad. We know that that's a really, really bad way to design anything, by just looking at what the results of a last thing were, rather than really unpacking what all the processes are that went into creating that visible event.
Maybe I can speak really quickly to that idea of processes, just to build on that. When I thought about this question, I thought about from the artist side, leading and lagging indicators of success. So I don't really individually have access to that many ways of measuring the impact of work. But on the leading side, I can interrogate the quality of the relationship building with communities that I'm doing. So I have a project that's created with 2 water protectors from Aamjiwnaang First Nation, Vanessa and BZ Gray. So that project, in terms of, we couldn't have anticipated what the lagging indicators are, which have been way exceeded our expectations. But at least in terms of the leading, we wanted to make sure that Vanessa and BZ were with us at every step of the way. We wanted to make sure that every iteration, they were in part of the consultation process in terms of what's working, what's not working, what's next, what's missing, what's really driving your creative drive. And then in the lagging indicators now, what's really exciting is we're seeing audience members who've seen the show come to Vanessa and BZ's events in their community for volunteer work because they've seen the show. And so that's it has been an exciting way of thinking about metrics, at least from the individual artist and as a political project.
And that's really a question of one-to-one scale, isn't it? Like we talked about changing ourselves first, like doing that first step, changing our ways of seeing and doing. But then the real change happens, when people want to get to what I was calling the yes, even at this institution level, we still need people who actually drive from within, who have a desire for change. And there's this whole question of collaborating towards supporting each other through the anxiety, the emotional, just like discomfort and feeling that you're going against the grain, even though we have a lot of discourse, which is around change, resilience, etc. Actually, we're not really supported, especially through the emotional aspects of this. What else is on your minds? What else, what are you inspiring each other to do next, for example?
I was thinking, Charlotte, about something you were saying about the economics model. I was thinking of donut economics, and I was thinking of that Kate Raworth's model of the donut economic model of, it's not just about, it's about circularity and regeneration, not just about growth, like away from this model of growth, but thinking about a holistic model of measurement. What does what are all the different metrics, like on your carbon footprint thing that you were looking at? So I was wondering, like, could we start to think about a donut economics type model for cultural programs or institutions, so that we're looking at, we're looking at those metrics of like, how is it not just about growth or its footprint, but how are we measuring well-being impacts? How are we measuring social cohesion? How are we measuring participation, shared decision-making, equality, diversity, inclusion? You could have there could be a nice sort of donut economics type model for cultural programs as well.
And I've put the link in the chat so people can discover what is donut economics. But it is so many models to to take and to adapt, to adopt and adapt, because sometimes it doesn't work as it is for our needs, but it's all about just feeding this internal change and becoming more fluent with concepts that are not just about measuring, everything we talked about before, calorie counts, for example, but actually how does this taste, and all these questions that are more complex, but so much more interesting. So we're going to have a bit of time at the end of the session for individual breakout rooms with each of our guests. And in the meantime, we've asked Kevin to give us a kind of, an exiting address, I guess, something to weave things together. And, we invite you to do the same for yourself. I mean, I know it's a lot of information. It's funny because we didn't really talk about art, but that's all we talk about in so many ways, so how does this all resonate with your practice, with the way you feel about the need for change, but also the resistance around you? We would love to hear that from you, and you'll have time to chat about this in the breakout room. We want to make time for it. So we're going to hear from Kevin, and then Stephanie and I will just close the official session, and then we'll stop recording, and we'll have this soft time to do what Charlotte was inviting us to do, which is to talk about what matters. So over to you, Kevin.
Awesome. Thanks, Fanny. And thanks again so much, Chris and Charlotte. It's been a real pleasure to be in conversation with you today. I hope everybody is as excited about this as I am. First of all, I just want to acknowledge folks on this call. I'm sure you've been in situations in your institutions for which you are the change maker. You are the person that's trying to get some of these values across to that core of that institution. So I just want to acknowledge you even being here is probably evidence of that already taking place. So I'm with you and I know what that's like. So I guess keep going is the first part that I just want to start with. I want to take us back to the beginning of our discussion, which was we started with values, and we started with thinking about resources, really. So making sure that everybody is aligned in values is really critical, but that doesn't mean much if the resource of space, the resource of time isn't there to meet those values. So that, just to remind everybody, that's kind of where we started the foundation of this conversation. From there, we talked about how do we get specific, how do we listen to understand, and how do we have the openness so that listening is able to change us while still being anchored to those values. There was a theme of an alive model. We talk about ecology a lot in Canada, the ecosystem model, but that these are conversations about people, and so that they're innately alive, and our institutions very often can feel not very alive at all. We talked a lot about an idea of network, and that maybe one of the ways that we can measure this work is the quality of these connections. Can we strengthen the quality of these connections? And maybe a provocation is, can you map out what these connections are already in your institution? Where are the weak connections? Where are the aspirational connections? Are the connections that we have not where we actually want to be aligned in our ecosystems? There was also a conversation about intersectionality. I think that's a big, important distinction in the Canadian context. There is a lot of conversation about diversity, equity, inclusion, and I'll borrow from Dawn Janney Burley, who is a fantastic deaf artist that is based in both Canada and Finland, whose provocation to us at Why Not Theatre was to abandon the concept of inclusion, because inherently in that concept is that there is an inside to be included into, versus intersectionality is a world in which everybody can bring the fullness of their complexity to your space. Again, that's aspirational, but that is maybe one more provocation to be thinking about. What sort of model do we want to transition into? And maybe an intersectional way of looking at the world in our work is one of those. I also want to say we chatted a lot about change. I want to acknowledge that in 2020, you know, the racial justice conversation was a big blunt force shock kind of change, you know, and it forced a lot of conversations. And change doesn't, what was, I think, upsetting for folks was that it took a tragedy like the murder of George Floyd to see transitions in just the way that we talk about things. Not even just, they didn't manifest so quickly, but like even just the way that we talk about racial justice in artistic institutions. Change doesn't have to only take place when there is some horrible tragedy or when there's blunt force. And I think the ways of looking at change that are being offered by Chris and Charlotte today are really an empathetic, spacious, visionary, generous way of thinking about change, that it is piecemeal. It can be piecemeal, it can be vision-centric, you know, it can be alive, and it's not punitive. I think a lot of the way that we felt about that change in 2020 as well was fear, and it doesn't have to be that way. So I would just, yeah, want to bring that up for sure as well. If I still have a couple of minutes, I would say one structure that maybe we can, might be a provocation is discretionary funds, especially in larger institutions that have access to funding that may not be allocated at the beginning of a fiscal year or becomes available throughout a year when a project changes. Maybe that goes into a community discretionary fund that can be nimble. And somebody in the institution is able to facilitate conversations about the best uses of those dollars. Maybe it's a commitment to a percentage of an annual operating budget that actually goes into a nimbleness fund or a change fund. That may be some way that we can continue to structurally have those leading indicators of change. One other provocation is maybe we need to do less. I think this is a conversation that's like already in our ecosystem, but like do less and for real do less. Do less and do it in a way that's very anchored to our values. Yeah, and then maybe a final couple thoughts here on the ecological conversation. I think what's really important to take away from one of the things that are very important to take away from Charlotte's contribution to this conversation is this idea of transition is not the default of the way that we think about climate in North America. I'll say Canada specifically. We talk about sustainability, and I think about stasis in a not healthy way, and I think about like institutions being sustainable, and that's actually a very rigid thing. And we actually need transition in the way that we think about these topics. And so I think that that's a very profound difference that often can be seen as like an interchangeable thing, but they're not. Transition is one thing that asks you to change deeply. And yeah, maybe just to circle back to that big idea, this has all been about change. It takes time, it's alive, it's responsive. I just want to say thanks so much again to Fanny and to Steph and to Chris and to Charlotte for all their expertise and generosity here. And maybe one final thing that I'll say is we chat about metrics, and I also think that change is felt. And so like just not to make it too quantitative, you know, it's also really qualitative. When a community engagement activity is like just rocks your socks, is that the term, you know, and you're like buzzing at the end of it, and the community says we want more, you know, and this was something we didn't know that would turn out this way, or that we would enjoy so much, or X, Y, and Z. I think those are also great signs to keep moving forward. Those are signs for where successes are already taking place, and yeah, to celebrate and to enjoy that feeling and to follow that feeling, as I'm sure many of the projects that are already being facilitated by this group, this network here at FLeX, are already doing. So I wish everybody really well with their collaborating with society projects, and thanks so much for the time and space today.
All right, we're going to get into our breakout room soon. I am, if I just go on mute, it's because the fire drill is running in my building, which is kind of annoying, but I did get what you said, Kevin. I followed your lips. I am going to share our presentation just to close our conversation, like we said. So this was the final spotlight for our program. Really want to hear from people who've been on one or more of these sessions. What resonated with you? What are the seeds that have been planted that are taking roots? You know, what is changing for you? Because this is really important for us to know, and then we can continue. We can continue the work with you. So if you have feedback, Steph will share the link into the chat now. It's essential, and all feedback is good feedback, so go for it. And every session has been recorded, so you can revisit. We will try to create some transcripts or some summaries for all of them, because there's been so many resources and ideas and call to action, provocations shared. You know, this is all good, so we will circulate the information as Chris was redefining evaluation. I love that. So Steph, over to you for a final thank you.
Yes, thank you, Fanny, and thank you so much to our guest speakers for sharing their experiences and their insights into this topic, and to our participants also for being so engaged. Before we move on to our networking period, which will take us to 12 p.m., I just wanted to thank, again, our funders and our partners for supporting us on the FLeX program. So thank you to Canadian Heritage, to the Kingston Arts Council, City of Sudbury, City of Toronto, Ottawa Festivals Network, and Ontario Culture Days. We extend our deep thanks to them. And with that,